Morning Retro. I'm Nate.
And I'm Ryan. And today we're going to talk about one of my beloved pieces in my collection, and everyone's favorite console, really, and that is the Atari Jaguar. Yep. So for those who don't know, this was the last home console from Atari. This was really the nail in their deathbed. Came out in 1993, ceased production in 1996. Very small library of games. We're looking at about 50 officially licensed games, another 20 or so with the CD add-on. But what is this console exactly? Well, it was meant to be, if you believe Atari, the next 64-bit powerhouse, ushering in the age of 3D gaming.
Not quite.
Not quite. It saw a lot of ports from 2D consoles that were already out.
Yep.
It had a controller that really wasn't conducive to what they were trying to do as far as 3D play, which you can see there. And it's a two-player console, and there just aren't a lot of two-player games on it in general. They really pushed for some fighting games early on in its life, but I don't know. It's near and dear to my heart because it's so weird, and because Atari was my first console. I really got excited at the premise of this back in my youth, but of course it disappeared.
You had to be the only kid excited about the Jaguar. Like, everyone is talking about this potential Nintendo 64 or anything like that. Like,
or the PlayStation.
Yeah, PlayStation. I want the Jaguar. Everyone probably just looked at you blankly. Did you ever see one in a store?
No.
Okay.
I don't. Well, I mean, I'm sure I must. I don't recall. I really don't recall seeing one in a store.
I've never seen one in the store.
Yeah, I don't think I did. I recall seeing a 3DO in a store, which also came out the same year. And I didn't know what that was as a kid, but somehow I had heard of the Jaguar through commercials.
Wow.
Yeah, and I never knew anyone that owned one. Had never played one until this came into my collection as an adult.
And so for some reason you were just drawn to that.
Yeah, I really thought, I was so excited. I had such great nostalgic memories of being really young with the Atari. There's this is it. They're bringing it back. As much as I love Nintendo, this still caught my eye.
And even some of the marketing, though, is very different than what we're used to seeing. You know, the Nintendo is very, playful, and they have, just those very well-known characters that they continue to push on every system. And so for a box just to be black, Jaguar on it, just looks a little bit tougher.
And in the advertising, they kind of took a little bit of the lame, it wasn't lame, I mean, it worked for Sega, the aggressive, approach.
Sega Genesis is 16 bits, 3DO is 32 bits, the Atari Jaguar is 64 bits. So with 64 bits and 3D graphics that you can only get with Jaguar, which is more advanced? Clifford! Jaguar!
But they didn't really land, they didn't have the mascot. I mean, they tried with things that they thought were iconic to Atari, like Defender and Missile Command. But by that point, in 1993, you had kids who had never even heard of Atari, let alone those properties. So it just kind of didn't help their case. They got no third-party support. You can kind of tell why.
The first time that you brought me over to really just dive into some systems that I've never played before, because I'm really just a Nintendo guy, and you're like, it's time to broaden your horizons a little bit. And so we played a lot of different things, but the Jaguar stood out because I thought it was awful. I thought it looked terrible, but you could look over at Ryan. Ryan's like, "See, that's pretty cool, right? Let's listen to this intro." And so, for some reason, this is extremely nostalgic to you.
Yeah, I mean, this I put in the same category as almost like a TurboGrafx, where it's like as you become a collector, these things are so much fun because you never got hands-on with them. And that's part of the reason I love it. And, it is not a great console, admittedly, but it's not a complete waste. It had potential, and there are some games that really show that off, and we can kind of talk about some of those games when we come back.
Absolutely free. Sonic 2 handles stubborn stains, embarrassing bald spots, no problem. It even slices and dices, makes thousands of julienne fries.
All right, welcome back. So we're still talking about the Jaguar, and as you know, as collectors,
the games.
And as gamers,
get some games.
The games are the important piece. The games make or break the console, right?
Yeah, and these all broke the console.
A lot of them did. So let's talk about the main problem in general. Is that a lot of the emphasis on early Jaguar games was 2D games. It didn't really wow people, and then that wasn't a good first impression. The pack-in title Cybermorph, I think we played that a little bit. It's a very ambitious game. I think it's the first polygonal game on a home console. But then you compare that to Star Fox, which came out and clearly is a superior game.
Right.
They handled the 3D better, they got the visuals better, it just ran better, there was no annoying AI. Some other notable ones, there's like the Bubsy game. Everyone loves Bubsy.
Nobody loves Bubsy.
So why wouldn't you want an exclusive
You're the only guy I know
game?
that has every Bubsy title on every system.
Yeah, so they led with things like Bubsy, exclusive Bubsy
Right.
for the Jaguar. It's the worst Bubsy.
Right. I believe it.
Not that Bubsy's great in general, but
one that
was,
really stands out for me is Tempest.
Yeah, Tempest 2000. So if we're going to get into the good stuff, the stuff people will say are the games in the system, Tempest 2000 is great. It's an update on the classic Vector game from the arcade, and it has a really good visual feel, 3D effects, great soundtrack, and like club dance music. That one is very fun. It's a very simple game, and again, even as a great game, it kind of shows where Atari just failed to look forward because they were still making, minute by minute arcade style games where that had been out for a generation at this point. Some other notable pieces. There's some solid ports. NBA Jam Tournament Edition is great.
I didn't know that was even on
there. Raiden is great. And Doom. Doom plays incredibly well. It's probably one of the best ports to a home console. But again, who was getting excited about those games that had already been out on other consoles?
Right.
I mean, if you had a Jaguar, it's a nice option, but it's not going to sell your system. And really, I think the shining example that everyone goes to is always going to be the Alien vs. Predator, which we did play. And that one, you can tell...
And it's good.
Yeah, you can tell the visuals are great. It feels like any other shooter of that era, right? Doom, Wolfenstein. But that sadly wasn't enough. And then I think the other one that I pointed out to you that I think is probably the best at showing what the hardware can do and where it could have gone is that Iron Soldier. And that's the one where you're playing in a giant mech. You're running through cities. You can look down at your feet as you punt tanks. You crush buildings. You shoot helicopters. And it's a great idea. It leverages the console, but it shows the main sticking point with interacting with it. And again, it is that controller. That controller is not conducive to 3D movement. And then they insisted on games either not using those number pads at all or using them too much. And you spend more time looking down at the controller trying to figure which of the 12 buttons you need to hit instead of enjoying the game.
So there was a game that caught my eye, and I don't know if we really talked about it, but it's called Baldies. Tell me a little bit about it. It says Jaguar CD.
Yeah, so that one I think is a port. I think it was on PCs and stuff back in the day too. And that is the only Jaguar CD game I have. So the CD attachment, which was the thing to do at the time, right? You put a CD attachment on your console.
Disk drives, all of those things, they would just expand the memory.
So that one's factory sealed because I don't have the CD attachment. Those things have become ridiculously expensive. They're highly unreliable. I mean, I don't know what the prices are currently. Last time I looked a couple of years ago, it was $500 loose. And it adds maybe another dozen potential games. So very interesting, but that was already coming out at the point where the Jaguar was dying in 1996. And some other interesting things, there's a failed VR that was going to come out, a headset.
That's crazy.
They pulled it off the market. There is a Pro controller that actually fixes the 3-button issue. You get 6 for fighting games. All 3 of the terrible ones that this console has. And
so if someone, for some weird reason, is just like you, that wants to jump into collecting Jaguar, don't. But if you were to recommend just those 2 games that you're like, these are the 2 that you should always look for, what are those 2 games?
I would say Tempest 2000 and Alien vs. Predator, obviously.
Those are the 2.
I would say Iron Soldier you should pick up as well. Like, that's a great game. And maybe just stop there. Honestly,
just be done.
If I'm going to be honest, what makes having a Jaguar in 2021 still relevant is the fact that emulation is not great for it. That controller is not very easily replicatable by other means. So it's kind of one of those consoles where you have to have the hardware to really enjoy it. So if you're really a purist and you want to get in there, I would recommend finding a console and getting an EverDrive. They do exist now for the Jaguar, believe it or not. They'll set you back a couple $100, but trust me, that's the way to go.
Well, there you have it, Jaguar. We're jumping into it. Some awesome things here. Make sure you're following us on social media. If you're a Jaguar person, throw it down in the comments below. Ryan would love to talk to you all day about Jaguar. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media.
Did we touch that?
We just did again.
All right. And as always, keep that coffee in the mug. God, we need an ender.